Hello and good afternoon to the latest MEED webinar, which this month is on the Saudi Giga Projects program, the latest updates. Now, we've done already 2 or 3 Giga Project updates as webinars this year, and it is by far the most popular subject right now, both in terms of webinar viewers and also in terms of what the market is talking about. So I'm expecting a lot of good questions on the webinar after I have presented it from you. And as ever, I'll be endeavoring to answer them once this 30-minute or so presentation has completed. So my name is Edward James. I'm the head of content and research at MEED, and the format I'm sure you're all very familiar with. I will give the presentation, and afterwards I'll take your questions. And as usual, put your questions into the Q&A box in your Zoom menu bar, and I'll try and answer them at the end. Now, as ever, this presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded, as well as being sent to you over the next few days, so you'll be able to listen to it again in your own time, as well as share with any friends or colleagues. And also, as ever, we'll be sending you the presentation in PDF format in due course for all of you who have registered for this event. So let's begin. Just an update on our latest premium research report. This is our Saudi Giga Projects 2025 report. It is essentially a longer, much more extensive version of this presentation today. I believe it's nearly 700 pages long and in PowerPoint format, as you can see there, and has every single piece of detailed information you could possibly want about the scope, the contacts, the contracts, the tenders on each and every Giga project in Saudi Arabia, as well as how to pre-qualify and register for each of the Giga project clients. Now, for all of you registered and here today, there is a special discount, as you can see, $600. If you apply that code, webinar 600, and if it's something you're interested in, there's a QR code here below, and you can go on to the report purchase page to find out more by checking out the scope, the sample pages, and the table of contents. Now, just also a reminder about a couple of our events coming up. On Wednesday this week, yes, just 2 days' time, we have our MENA Construction Summit here in Dubai Marina. We are covering a range of issues from some excellent speakers from around the region, looking at various hot topics facing the construction summit, ranging from the Egyptian contractors and Egyptian projects market all the way through to PPPs in the GCC, and everything in between, such as sustainability issues and latest construction technology. It's a one-day event, and if it is something that you are keen to attend or learn more about, then please, again, here's your QR code, take a photo of it, and you go onto the web page to find out more. So it's just in 2 days' time, so you have to be quick because physical spaces are limited at the event. Now, something a little bit further off, giving you a little bit more time to take a look at, is our Saudi Giga Projects 2025 conference and summit. This is a 3-day event happening between the 12th and 14th of May next year in Riyadh. You may have heard us talk, you may have attended our previous Giga Projects event earlier this year, which was an absolutely fantastic conference with more than, I think, 10 of the Giga project clients speaking, giving details about their individual projects and specifics about some of the tenders and contracts on them, as well as a range and host of other topics and key speakers from the public sector, as well as other private sector entities in the kingdom, a combination of presentations, panels, and fireside chats. There are also going to be next year some workshops with key Giga project clients, some pre-arranged meetings where you can sit with them individually to ask them questions and to potentially talk about your business and what you can offer, as well as gala dinner and other associated events. So It's our premium and the region's premium Giga projects event. And if you are interested, again, there's the QR code. And in advance of that Giga Projects conference, we held just a couple of weeks ago an advisory board meeting in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, where we discussed some of the key themes and topics that will comprise or constitute the agenda and the program at the Giga Projects conference next year. And you can see here, involved in this advisory board meeting are some key stakeholders within Saudi Arabia and the Giga Projects program, some government entities, the Giga Project clients themselves, as well as key stakeholders from the delivery side, the consultants and the contractors. So we have a very high-powered advisory board level of advisors and stakeholders who are informing us of the topics and discussion points for us to put into the agenda next year. So we're already well in advancing the program and the preparation for the Giga Projects event. And I'll be hoping to see you all there in person next May, as indeed I will hopefully see you all on Wednesday too in the Dubai MENA Construction Summit. And then finally, just for those of you who are maybe not aware of MEED, MEED is a business intelligence organization covering different services and platforms. We have our news, features and analysis service, MEED.com, our projects tracking platform, MEED Projects, and by tracking all projects in the region, we can quantify what's happening in the market. And indeed, most of the data that you will see in this presentation is sourced from MEED Projects. We also have our premium reports, such as the Saudi Giga Projects report that I've just been talking about, our events like the Giga Projects Summit and Conference, and our marketing solutions and bespoke research solutions with thought leadership roundtables, other bespoke events, and so on. Okay, let's kick off. Let's take a look at where we are today. First of all, in the GCC, and then narrowing down into Saudi Arabia and the Giga projects in particular. Now, most of you will be aware by now that 2023, last year, was an exceptional year, a year beyond all expectations when the value of contracts across all sectors in the GCC hit $243 billion, far in excess of the previous record in absolute terms of $174 billion seen in 2014. And well, almost double the 2022 number and far in excess of the previous 7-year average. So we saw an explosion in project activity last year, which of course is going to trickle through and flow through into subcontracts and material and equipment procurement this year and over the next 2 years as well. So we're really starting to see the Giga Projects program really starting to have a telling impact on project awards and activity generally in the region. But it wasn't just Giga Projects, there was also a record amount of oil and gas spending last year too. And the two of those factors combined led to this exceptional year. Now, I think we were talking just then about in absolute terms, but I think it's also important to look at the performance of the market last year, take into account inflation and adjusting for inflation. So, of course, $1 in 2014 spent on a project would be equivalent today of a much higher number. And you can see when we adjust for inflation that the 2014 and 15 numbers were around $230 billion. Those were the records up to this moment. So when you look at that $243 billion awarded last year, you can see that in terms of relative performance rather than absolute performance, then it was only a little bit higher than those 2014-15 numbers. Now, what I think that provides is some solace as to whether the market has taken on too much work or indeed whether it's working way beyond its capacity to deliver. On those inflation-adjusted terms, it would suggest that it is more than capable of absorbing this level of work when you take into account the inflation-adjusted numbers in 2014 and 2015. So I think that's fairly encouraging. Now, obviously, when we look at that same data, we need to look at it by country. This is in absolute terms. And you can see that last year's record numbers were really driven by Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Saudi Arabia hitting an all-time record high for any country in the GCC of $113 billion, almost double the 2022 figure for it, and well in excess of any historical number seen for the kingdom. The UAE perhaps had an even more impressive jump by nearly tripling to $92.4 billion last year. I know there's a lot of conversation and talk about the Saudi market, but the UAE market performed nearly as well, and in any other year would have been an astounding number on its own, but not quite the same as the Saudi number, but nonetheless still a very impressive total, $92 billion last year. And again, that's a combination of both oil and gas spending by ADNOC and, of course, strong demand from Dubai real estate. The other markets are fairly small in comparison, but that obviously means that Saudi Arabia and UAE are really the two markets right now people are talking about. Now, before I narrow down into the Saudi market in particular, I have a quick poll question for you. And that is, for your company, or in your personal opinion, has 2024 so far been better than 2023, the same as 2023, or worse than 2023? And put in the answer of your choice. Here the answers are coming in. We've got 646 attendees live on the call right now, and we've got some 370 answered so far. And it's a clear winner for this question, and that is the market this year has been better than 2023. 60% of you say it's better than 2023. 22% of you say it's the same as 2023, and 18% of you say it's worse than 2023. So that would suggest that the strong performance of the market last year is being reflected by companies' performance this year, which again is a very positive sign. And indeed, the question everyone has been asking this year is, what is 2024 like? Are we going to continue 2023's strong performance, or was 2023 last year a one-off? Well, the good news is that it suggests, the data this year suggests that we are going to continue with last year's excellent performance in 2024. Indeed, in the case of Saudi Arabia, we have already exceeded last year's record number. And as of Friday last week, when I collated these numbers, Saudi Arabia had seen this year $121.8 billion of contracts awarded. That's about $8 billion higher than the 2023 number. So Saudi Arabia is continuing with its record performance, and that suggests that it is now firmly committed to its new paradigm of project spending. On the other hand, the UAE doesn't look like, with a month to go, that it's going to match last year's number. It's got $65 billion awarded this year compared with 92 last year. However, I think it's worth noting that that $65 billion number in any other year would have been a record number. So it's still performing extremely strongly, just not to the same extent as last year. And that's really due to a slightly lower value of spending in the oil and gas market. The construction market is still performing very well. Overall, this year, with about 5 weeks to go, we're on about $219 billion of contracts awarded, which again, in any other year would have been a record. And that's compared with $243 billion last year. So to all intents and purposes, the market is performing this year pretty much as it did last year, or a little bit lower. And that would again suggest that we are entering a new paradigm for project spending in the region. There's been a step change compared with the previous 10 years or so. And if you look at the other markets, they've also performed fairly strongly. It looks like well, Bahrain is up already on last year. It looks like Kuwait may well beat last year's number, and it's touch and go for Oman and Qatar whether they match or beat last year's numbers too. Okay, now let's narrow down to Saudi Arabia in particular. And I think we've seen already that that this year has already beaten last year's number for the kingdom. But let's look at that same data by sector. So this is the 121 billion dollars of contracts awarded this year, broken down by sector compared with last year's number. Here you'll see that power is the single largest sector by terms of contracts awarded this year, with nearly $40 billion worth of work awarded. Now, a large amount of that is in the solar power or renewable energy sector. Saudi Arabia wants to build a good 2 gigawatts a year of power projects. It also reflects the large number or large value of work awarded to build new gas-powered capacity. But it also, a large chunk of this number represents large spending by Saudi Electricity Company in transmission and distribution systems, substations, and overhead lines. So power sector, unusually for the region, is the largest single market segment this year in Saudi Arabia at least, followed by construction. Now you can see that construction, which comprises alongside transport and infrastructure, the mainstay or the largest single element of the Giga Projects program, you can see that even with 5 weeks to go, they're underperforming last year's number. So that would tend to suggest a slight slowing down of investment in construction and transport. On the other hand, gas spending is up on last year. It's double last year's number. Industrial projects and oil projects are also up, in the case of oil only marginally. And water sector is pretty much what it was last year. And water last year was a record for the kingdom. And finally, just to make a note, the petrochemicals project market spending dropped considerably. That's not really surprising, given that there are very few projects in petrochemicals and they tend to be of a high value. So there can be huge swings year on year. But it's interesting that when you take a look at the Saudi market performance, rather than it being one consistent level of spending across different segments, there are significant changes in them year on year. Right, now let's take a look at the Giga projects in particular. So what do we mean when we say Giga projects? And I think it's important to differentiate the definition here. So in Saudi Arabia, there are 5 official Giga projects, and you can see those in the top left-hand corner: NEOM, Red Sea Global, Diriyah, Roshan, and Qiddiya. These are the official 5 Giga projects. But when we are talking about the Giga Projects program in Saudi Arabia, most people are not referring to those 5 Giga projects alone. And neither do we at MEED and for the purposes of this presentation. We also include other PIF project company subsidiaries. You can see most of them here below: Saudi Downtown, New Baraba, Adara, Al Balad, The Rig, Romadina, Jeddah Central, Boutique Group, Al Khafji, which I'll talk about later, Suda Development, and of course King Salman International Airport Company. There's also a few others which I haven't added on here, but you can see that there are many other PIF Giga Project companies, some of them huge, in fact, some of them arguably bigger than some of the official ones. And we also include these or bundle them when we describe Giga projects, simply because that's really what people tend to be referring to when we're talking about Giga projects in Saudi Arabia. We also have several non-PIF project companies or organizations which are also developing huge projects, which we also describe as Giga projects, including Al Ula, Green Riyadh, Riyadh Sports Boulevard, and King Salman Park in Riyadh as well. And indeed, it's possible that over time, more PIF subsidiary companies will be announced and added to the Giga project list, as well as other non-PIF companies too. Now, not included for the purposes of this presentation as Giga projects, but are very substantial project programs in their own right, are major project programs from other key clients in the kingdom, such as National Housing Company, Saudi Aramco, Saudi Arabian Railways, SABIC, the Ministry of Sport, FIFA World Cup Projects Program, National Water Company, SEC, and so on. And indeed, these are very consequential for the projects market in the kingdom. And it's important not to ignore these when we're looking at the project opportunities in the kingdom as a whole. Right, just a quick summary. Most of you will have seen this picture before of the key Giga projects in the kingdom. To date, there have been about $96.3 billion of Giga projects awarded, out of a estimated total of about $850 billion. So a little bit over 10% of the way there in terms of total project spending. And so it's fair to say we're still at the very early stages of the Giga projects program, which is likely to run into the 2030s and well into the 2040s and beyond. Okay, before going any further, I have a second question for you. Have you noticed any slowdown in Giga projects activity in Saudi Arabia? The answers are yes, we have definitely noticed a slowdown. 2, it seems to be the same as before. And 3, the opposite. We've noticed an improvement in activity. So let's hear what you have to say. Again, we've got about 700 live attendees. Let's see what you are seeing. Okay, so with 425 responses, a very representative sample, statistically very relevant, we have again a clear winner. At 63%, yes, we have definitely noticed a slowdown in Giga project activity in Saudi Arabia, which is very interesting because this is what we have been hearing the market saying over the last 12 months. 22% say it seems to be the same as before, and 15% say it's the opposite. We've noticed an improvement in activity. So nearly 2/3 of you say that you've seen or feel a slowdown in Giga project activity. Now, let's see what the MEED data says. And indeed, it suggests that there has been a slowdown in Giga project spending this year, or at least this year to date. So we have seen over the last 5 years, a year after year increase in Giga project spending, with from $1.5 billion of contracts awarded in 2018 to $33 billion of awards in 2023 last year. Now, this year to date, as of mid-November, there have been about $21.6 billion of contracts awarded in the Giga projects program, those Giga projects which we were talking about in previous slides. Now, that is clearly not going to exceed last year's number. So I think it is fair to say that there has been a slowdown in spending, at least for the first 11 months of this year. Now, what does that mean? And what are the reasons for that? Well, this is something we are going to talk about and explore in the next few slides. And I think the other question that one must also ask is this a temporary blip, or is it something that's going to be a permanent fixture or a permanent situation of the Giga Projects program? In other words, are we going to see this start rising again, or can we expect going forward lower levels of spending on the Giga Projects program? But before I do so, before we explore those questions, let's take a look at some of the key Giga project contracts awarded this year already. So, as I mentioned, we have seen a slowdown, but we also have seen some very valuable contracts awarded this year, very significant in their own right. So it's not true to say that spending is completely stopped. There has been a large amount of activity regardless. Led by, of course, early at the beginning of the year by the Trojena Valley dams contract, $4.7 billion to Italian contractor Rebuild, and then by $1 billion plus contracts awarded by Diriyah, which in total have exceeded $5.6 billion. Here we've split them up into their various elements, but you can see Diriyah has been very active over the summer as well. We've also seen some key contracts awarded at Qiddiya, including the main stadium, the Prince Mohammed bin Salman Stadium contract. We've also saw the main stadium awarded by Roshan and Aramco in Dammam as well. And we're likely to see some other major stadium contracts awarded, not just for the FIFA World Cup in 2034, but also for the Asian Championship in 2027. So some very significant contracts awarded this year. Now, in terms of some of the major contracts awarded by client, and this is just an indicative number because it excludes spending on things like land acquisition or engineering and design works or any smaller contract, some MEP contracts and so on. This is an indicative listing or ranking of Giga projects by the amount of capex that they have made expenditure on. NEOM leads the way, more than $35 billion of contracts awarded that are known about at the Giga project client. It is the biggest spender, well, it is also the biggest project, of course, and it is likely to remain the biggest spender on Giga projects or biggest client in Giga projects for some time to come. We then have Diriyah following its large amount of work awarded this year. Then Roshan, the housing program, NEOM Green Hydrogen Company, which is, of course, the world's largest green hydrogen complex at NEOM. One could arguably add this to the NEOM number, but given that there are other stakeholders in the project company, we've split it out there. We have Red Sea Global, about $10 billion. Then Qiddiya, King Salman Park 7, which is now part of Qiddiya, then Sports Boulevard and Al Ula. Of course, there are others, but it's fair to point out that project companies like New Murabba, Saudi Downtown, Ruwa Medina, and King Salman International Airport, for example, are all still at the early stages, but will creep up on this list certainly over the years to come. Now, in terms of the short term, again, we've seen a slowdown, but we're certainly not seen a slowdown or stop in terms of tendering activity. And indeed, if you look over the next 6 months for tenders or projects in tender and likely to be awarded over that 6-month period, then you can see there's a large pipeline of exciting projects across the different Giga project clients to come. So led the way by the Vault Package B, which is a part of the Trojena region of Saudi Arabia. And Trojena, of course, is under pressure to deliver all its infrastructure and facilities by 2029 and the Asian Winter Games. We also have Enowa, the utilities company of NEOM, which is planning its 1.2 gigawatt wind farm at Gayal. We have the signaling and track works on the NEOM spine infrastructure railway. We have key contracts starting to be tendered and awarded. King Salman Airport, we have water pipelines for oxygen and utility tunnels. We've got residential areas and so on. So we've got a wide diversity of key contracts to be awarded at the different Giga projects over the next few months. This is only those in tender. Of course, there are many billions of dollars more in design. Right, what's happened on the Giga project clients over the last few months since my last Giga projects update? Well, these are the key recent developments. So just last week, as you will surely all have seen, we saw the departure from NEOM of its CEO, Nadhimi Al-Nasser. His role departure was announced on the 12th of November last week, and he's going to be replaced on a temporary basis as acting CEO by the PIF real estate head, Ayman Al-Mudaifi. So Ayman Al-Mudaifi is now taking on the role of leading the world's largest project. Now, there was no official reason given for Al-Nasser's departure or exit from NEOM, but it also comes at a time where there has been a lot of focus on some of the delivery challenges on NEOM, but in the line in particular. So the issues, well, perhaps the main one that people have been talking about was sort of the slow drip feed of information on the line that had been scaled back or rephased to focus on the first 3 modules rather than multiple modules across the full 120-kilometer distance of the line. So now there's a focus in the first phase to 2030 of these 3 modules, which have a length of about 2.4 kilometers. They're 800 meters long each, but with a space in between. But although there'll be the sort of glass facade throughout those 2.4 kilometers. Don't forget the line, other than being 800 meters long, the buildings are going to be, the buildings themselves, the modules themselves are 500 meters high and 200 meters wide. So extremely major or huge projects. I mean, you're talking about something like 15 times the total built-up area of Burj Khalifa, for example. Now, I think it's only natural that when you're building projects of this size, that there are going to be challenges in delivery, and NEOM is no real exception. Perhaps not just in terms of delivery timelines, but in terms of costs. Now, the estimates that we understand are coming in for these first 3 modules alone is a capital expenditure requirement of more than $150 billion for those 3 modules. Now, you can understand that not only does that reflect or demonstrate the massive, massive size of these buildings, these modules, and the engineering challenge that it comes with them, but it also, of course, demonstrates the huge challenge that companies are going to have to be able to deliver those projects, especially by 2030. So it's no real surprise that NEOM is starting to focus purely on those 3 modules rather than the whole project at once. Now, in fairness to NEOM, when they announced the line a few years ago, they never explicitly stated that the full scope of the line would be delivered by 2030. However, they also didn't explicitly rule that out, but it can be argued that NEOM, or the line as a whole, has been a bit misrepresented in terms of its total delivery timeline and schedule. However, it's now very clear that the focus is on just these first 3 modules and getting them delivered in time. They're, of course, about halfway along the line over the hidden marina. And if you've been reading the news, one of the modules will also feature one of the World Cup stadiums now, which will be an elevated part of one of the modules. Of course, there are other challenges, not just on the line. We've got Trojana has to be delivered by 2029 for those Asian Winter Games, of course, and work has got to really accelerate there as well. It's also worth noting that alongside Al-Nasser, there have been a number of other NEOM senior executives who haven't had their contracts renewed and who are also leaving the business. Don't forget, please, just a reminder that if you do have any questions on this or indeed any other aspect of the Giga Projects program, please submit your questions in the Q&A box and I'll do my best to answer them at the end of this presentation. And just also a reminder that this presentation is being recorded and you'll have a chance to watch it or listen to it again in your own time once we've uploaded it to YouTube. So what are the key challenges now facing NEOM? Not just the line, but the project as a whole. So this is just my personal subjective opinion, but I think in terms of challenges, I think there has been a communication challenge on NEOM, some mixed messages, some unclear messaging, and I think this has led to some of the issues we've seen this year around the line and its delivery schedules and the implications for NEOM. I think at times, due to various reasons, such as perhaps incomplete designs or changing plans or master plans or whatever reason, it hasn't always been particularly clear what NEOM really is or stands for. You know, we've seen region names change, we've seen regions introduced, we've seen some projects proceed and others not proceed. And of course, now we're seeing a clarification of the phasing of the line. And when you have that sort of lack of clarity, then you do unfortunately have sometimes media headlines that filling in that gap, which can distort the messaging somewhat. Now, as we just seen with that $150 billion potential cost for the first 3 modules of the line, there has been a big strain on costs for the NEOM as a whole, as well as all the other Giga projects. A lot of the budgets for these projects may have been calculated or estimated a couple of years ago, before the sort of this massive inflation that we've seen, both in costs and general inflation over the last few years. And of course, when you've got budgets coming in or bids coming in or new estimates coming in higher than first envisaged, that of course does create challenges and does result in some delays, some value engineering and some reconfiguring of projects. Tying into that is the sheer complexity of some of these projects. When you are talking about a single module of the line being 500 meters high, 800 meters long, 200 meters wide, then of course you can see that you've got some projects which are groundbreaking, cutting edge. And of course, when you have these engineering complex projects, then you do have challenges in their delivery. Now, I think on some Giga projects, I think it's fair to say NEOM in particular, you do have a very high staff turnover rate among senior executives. It's not a secret that that a lot of people are being moving out to NEOM, but also coming back. Life at NEOM is fairly remote. All the staff live on site. And for some, it's a fantastic project to work on. It's a great environment to work, but for others, it can be difficult, and it does result in fairly high staff turnover, which of course doesn't help or promote efficiencies or continuity of the business. Now, some issues which are perhaps not as well known, but are nonetheless factors that are impacting some of these Giga projects. Now, as we all know, these projects are, in many cases, do have this sort of 2030 deadline to be delivered. And that puts a lot of pressure on spending, on KPIs, and making sure that contracts are being awarded and that the project progresses. Now, for many executives or people working on these Giga projects, they are incentivized by annual KPIs and annual bonuses. And that means that sometimes decisions are made, arguably and subjectively, that decisions can be made based on short-term KPIs and targets, rather than ones which may be more beneficial for longer-term KPIs and benefits. And ultimately, some people may take the view, and this is purely, again, subjective, that some people may take the view that because of the long-term nature of some of these projects, decisions they make now may not be something that they have to deal with later on down the line. Of course, timeline pressures are all tied into that. And I think something that has been well talked about and evidenced in the Giga Projects program is a relative lack of foreign investment to date. We are starting to see some developers move in to some of these Giga projects, and there are very positive conversations ongoing. But whether it's in terms of financing or in terms of committed expenditure by the private sector or foreign investment, this is still, I think, at the early stages and probably not at the levels that the PIF and the government may have first expected. And of course, we've got other issues like logistics challenges for some projects on the Red Sea coast caused by the Red Sea crisis, which has led to some material delays as well. But there's also been a lot of very positive developments as well on the Giga Projects program. Here you see a rather stunning image of Sindala Island, which recently opened. And I absolutely think this is a fantastic project. This is one of the regions of NEOM. And as the projects progress, we are now starting to see the first projects open on the Giga Projects program. We've seen the first 3 hotels open at the Red Sea Global. We've seen Sindala open here. We've seen some key projects at Diriyah reaching completion as well. And of course, in Roshan, some housing projects are also ready for delivery too. And I think if you start looking at some of them, you'll realize just how exceptional they are. And over the next couple of years, more and more projects will be completed, and you'll start being able to visualize the Giga projects in their entirety and in their final state. So I think, look, as you can see, Sindala Island here, beautiful project, amazing location, architecturally wonderful, and certainly stunning. And I'm sure these will be projects that many people will be keen to visit and attend. Other major developments over the last few months, well, as I mentioned earlier, $5.5 billion worth of contracts awarded at Diriyah, which is on to the west of Riyadh, around or near to the UNESCO World Heritage Site at Tureif. This is a fantastic project. If you haven't been there, next time you're in Riyadh, go and visit. It's a very culturally sensitive project in keeping with the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Very low rise with a lot of its infrastructure, utilities and parking below ground, and it really is going to be an exceptional cultural mixed-use residential retail hub. And 3 major contracts awarded this summer worth more than $5 billion, as you can see here. Several hotels, golf clubs, retail facilities, universities, museums, and schools, and really an exceptional Giga project there. And if you drive to the west of Riyadh, you'll be able to see it for yourself. Now, a couple of new developments, a couple of new Giga projects, which you may not be aware of. These have not been announced ever officially or discussed. And in fact, if you were to go on the internet or Google them, you won't find much or anything at all on them. This is perhaps the next Giga project. This is called the Gulf Coast Real Estate Development Company, or better perhaps known as Al Khafji. This is a PIF subsidiary project which is on the Kuwaiti border in the divided zone just north of Khafji. And this is basically, as you can see on the right-hand side, a sort of horizontally long project with a residential coastal community along the coast there, and with 10,000 primary and secondary housing units. There's also going to be a new airport being built. There's a new HQ and residential area for the Saudi Arabia Chevron, which operates the onshore portion of the divided zone on behalf of Saudi Arabia. And then there's an agricultural zone, which is featuring farmlands as well. So this is a major project that's going to be delivered up to 2040 and then beyond. Tendering has already started for that. And for Kuwaiti companies and companies along Saudi Arabia's Gulf Coast, this is certainly an interesting project opportunity. Actually, it's interesting because a lot of the housing that is going to be built is actually going to be for Kuwaiti nationals, both primary and secondary homes as well. So a commercial project, and is likely to be one of many along the Arabian Gulf Coast. As you know, most of the Giga projects have been in other parts of Saudi Arabia, but I think the PIF is beginning to turn its attention to the Gulf Coast, as well as other areas in the Eastern Province, such as Sheba, which is near the UAE border. Another project which has never been formally announced, but which is also a PIF subsidiary, is Project W. otherwise known as the monolith. Now, the monolith is a tourism-focused project, a massive resort of more than 1,000 keys near to Al Ula in the northwest of Saudi Arabia. And its client is the Destinations Development Company, DDC, which, as I said, is a subsidiary of PIF. It, as you can see here, includes a 1,000-key resort, hotel, water park, sports center, observatory, planetarium. So it's basically a tourism destination. Very exciting, and again, another demonstration of Saudi Arabia's tourism objectives. Right, now I just want to talk very quickly about demand signaling. We've gathered some data over the last few months and year around the material and equipment requirements for the Giga projects, as well as some other major project programs. And this really is here just to demonstrate some of the enormous material requirements required by the projects market in Saudi Arabia from just a few Giga project clients. So, for example, Roshan says it requires about 40 million tons of concrete to complete its housing program. The first 3 modules of the line are going to need 11.5 million tons. Ruwa Medina, 3.7 million tons, and even Aramco needs 4 million tons of concrete just to 2027 alone. Windows, Roshan, 4.3 million windows required, 7 million meters of pipes it needs, 3.5 million AC units and 5 million doors, 80 million square meters of tiles, 6.5 million sanitary ware pieces. So just for one Giga project alone, the material requirements are enormous. And it continues, as you see, whether it's in paint or steel or cladding, cabling, wiring, enormous amounts of material requirements needed. And that's just for some of these projects. So the obvious question is, where are all these materials and equipment going to come from? And that is an unanswered question. Certainly, there is a lot of capacity going to be built in the kingdom to serve these markets, but there is also going to have to be a lot of overseas capacity to be imported into the kingdom. It's also worth saying that, as is likely, the timeframes for some of these projects are extended, then the annual demand for some of these materials is also going to be stretched. But nonetheless, scale of the challenge, the indicative scale, is outlined here. Right, finally, challenges and discussion points. Final question here is, what do you believe is the single greatest challenge facing the Saudi Giga Projects program? I've given you 8 options here. Please read them all before selecting. We've got staff turnover, aggressive deadlines, geopolitical events, lack of foreign investment, financing them, payments, contractor manpower, material equipment availability, or increasing contract costs. So 8 options. Let's see what you as a market think. Take your time, please, to consider them all. So we are getting close to 400 responses now. Again, statistically viable, representative of the market. And we have no clear winner. Well, we have in first place, well, this is a dubious first place. I'm not sure it's a first place you want to be in, but it is contractor manpower, material or equipment availability. About 1/5 of you, or 21%, say this is the biggest challenge. We have increasing contract costs at 18%, and also at 18%, we have financing these Giga projects. Then we have at 14% lack of foreign investment. We then have aggressive deadlines at 11%. We have payments at 8%, as well as geopolitical events. And then staff turnover and retention, we have at just 3%. So a broad mix amongst you in terms of what you believe are the key challenges facing the market. So no one challenge in particular. Right, just summarizing some of these challenges. I'm running out of time for this presentation, so I won't go through these all. But as you can see, a lot of things to think about, whether that's material supply, whether that's capacity to deliver from the contracting manpower material perspective, whether it's financing projects, whether it's a lack of international contractors, whether it's contractual risk, deadlines, and so on. There are a number of challenges and issues that the Giga Projects program has to overcome. So far, so good, it must be said. As we've seen, a lot of great projects already being delivered, a lot of projects already being awarded and are being delivered successfully, but some of these challenges are undeniable and are still faced. So as the market progresses and the Giga Projects program progresses, these are going to be the key issues that the PIF and the Giga Project clients are going to grapple with. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll now take your questions, but before I do so, quick question, if I may, which is how would you like us to call you to understand how MEED can support your business? Quick question here. If you can kindly fill that out, if there's any way MEED can support or help you, please fill out that poll, and someone from MEED will get in touch. So we've got the choice here: MEED projects, premium intelligence reports, MEED.com, our MENA Construction Summit next year, and the Giga Projects reports. Sorry, Saudi Giga, my mistake. MENA Construction Summit in 2 days' time, the Saudi Giga Projects 2025 next year, MEED.com, the premium intelligence reports, or MEED projects. So thank you very much for that. All right. And just a reminder, on one of those products and services is our Giga Projects Report 2025. Please scan the QR code if you want to avail of a nice discount we're giving you on this report. It's the reference report of record for the Giga Projects program. It's used by all government entities and some of the Giga Project clients themselves in Saudi Arabia. So if you're interested, please contact us to find out more. And don't forget, 2 days' time, we have our MENA Construction Summit. If you are in Dubai and want to attend, it's the definitive event on all things construction in the MENA region. There's your QR code. It's a one-day event next week in Dubai Marina. Please scan the code if you're interested in attending. And of course, finally, just to remind you all about the Giga Projects Program Conference and Summit next year, 3-day event, the Giga Projects event of the year, the most important one. It's going to be full of Giga Project clients, workshops, summits, events, presentations. If you are at all interested in Giga Projects, this is the place to be. Right, I'll now take your questions, and one by one. And we have 40 questions or so, and I'll do my best to answer them. Right, what is your view on reprioritization of government spending? How will prioritized projects be wound up? So this is a good question, because clearly the government has to prioritize some questions more than some projects more than others. I'll be prioritizing the questions. The government has to prioritize projects. So we have to now look at the event-driven projects. That is the Expo 2030 in Saudi Arabia. That is projects for the Asian Football Championship and the Asian Winter Games, and of course the 2034 World Cup. So that means stadium, priorities in stadium, priorities in Trojana, and priorities in the Expo site. Now, all of these together are going to be likely in excess of about $20 billion. And these are projects the government has to prioritize and deal with. Now, at this stage, it's not clear what is going to be deprioritized, but we can see from events this year that there is a rephasing, there is a reconsideration of some of these projects. I think it's clear that this 2030 deadline or this 2030 sort of vision is going to gradually be extended. The 2040 vision is being prepared and will be released over the next 2 years. And so it's natural, I think, that we're going to see a lot of these Giga Project programs extend into 2030s and probably into 2040s and beyond. So There will be some deprioritization. It's not clear yet just what will be, but it's also clear from the priority side, it's going to be those event-driven projects. Question here is, what percent of oil and gas was in the $113 billion total value last year? I think if you go back to earlier slides, we can see that it was, you can see the split of the projects here for 2013 in this section. You can see that actually oil and gas in 2023 were quite small compared with 2024 when they make a much larger chunk of the projects market. Likewise, power is much larger than it was last year, whereas construction and transport, reflecting that slowdown in giga project spending, are smaller than what they were in 2023. Okay. Does MEED foresee a decline or slowdown in project spending in the next few years with oil prices having moderated? It's a good question, because what we can see, the most important element or factor driving project spending generally in the region is the oil price. The oil price has been about $80 a barrel for the last couple of years, but there is evidence or some indication that this is under pressure and that the oil price will slip to $70 and below. And if it does get much below that, then there will be a lot of pressure on project spending, because as we know, most projects in the region are financed by the state. The state is financed by oil sales. So there will be inevitably some slowdown across most sectors in the region if the oil price was to decline. On the giga project side, though, we have seen some of these giga project clients successfully tap into bond and finance markets and be able to finance their projects from bonds or corporate lending, corporate borrowing. And so I have no doubt that the government or PIF would be happy or prepared to continue with bond issuances or sale of assets, or, for example, in Aramco shares, in order to maintain the funding of these projects. I think the government view is that the Giga Projects program is of existential importance to Saudi Arabia, and that the spending on Giga Projects must continue regardless. So I do think there would be pressure overall on spending in Saudi Arabia based on a lower oil price. I'm not sure, however, the impact of that on the Giga Projects program. All right, continuing with your questions. So 2023 versus 2024 year to date, are the 2023 values for the year as a whole 2023, or are they for the equivalent period in 2023? It's a good question. Again, the 2023 numbers are full year numbers. The 2024 numbers are year to date, i.e. for the first 11 months of the year. But given that there's only 1 month of the year to go, they pretty much are for equivalent periods. But no, the 2023 numbers are for the year 2023, all 12 months as a whole. What are the insights for 2025 from MEED? Well, I think for 2025, if you look at the short-term pipeline, you can be very optimistic about the performance of the market next year. We still have, I think, well in excess of $100 billion of projects out in under bid evaluation right now. So these are the types of projects across the region which could be awarded any day, week, or month ahead, but certainly over the next 6 months. And then we have another $100 billion of projects out to bid in tender. So regardless of the country or the sector, there are more than $200 billion of contracts from which there is short-term visibility or short-term confidence that they could be awarded. Likewise, with the Giga Projects program, we still have a large number and value of tenders out to bid in the market. We have the first big tenders on New Maraba, likely to be awarded next year. We also have the first big tenders on King Salman International Airport, expected to be awarded. We have Roshan along the Red Sea coast. We have big contracts on Trojena that need to be awarded, the stadiums program, the Expo program as well. And I think we can see from the last 2 years, both 2023 and 2024, that Saudi Arabia in particular has entered a new paradigm of project spending, certainly a step change from previous years. And I fully expect that to continue, unless there was a disaster with the oil price, for example, or some geopolitical event. Likewise, the real estate market in the UAE is still very strong. There are indications that Abu Dhabi is planning some very significant projects, residential projects offshore between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, called the NEOM projects. If you go onto any satellite map right now, you can see the dredging of 3 very significant, very large islands, new islands between Tawila and Ramhan Island in Abu Dhabi. Watch that space for what's going to happen there. Some very major project announcement will be made. We're also seeing a step change in project activity in Northern Emirates, particularly around Marjan Island and Ras Al Khaimah. And of course, you've got things like the high-speed railway, the new Dubai airport, the Dubai Metro, and the sewerage and stormwater tunnels programs in Dubai. So when you add in oil and gas spending, electricity spending, and power spending in Saudi Arabia, the Giga projects program, what's happening in the UAE, then you've got a very impressive short-term pipeline of projects. So I'm pretty optimistic for the year ahead. Do you consider Expo 2030 as a mega project? 2030 Expo is about $8 billion. It's going to be close to the existing King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh. The client to date is the Royal Commission for Riyadh, and the master planning is underway. We have not as yet classified it as a Giga project. It certainly is a mega project, but work is yet to start on it. And given the tight deadline, work must start next year. So that is, again, another reason for optimism. Has the blip in contracts awarded in 2024 anything to do with investment in PIF shrinking? I don't think the slowdown in project activity among PIF projects this year has really got to do with internal PIF reasons, but simply got to do with the sheer challenge and complexity of delivering the Giga project program. There was a pause in spending earlier this year as the PIF and the government evaluated the budgets and prioritized the project spending on some of these Giga projects. But we are now seeing already some of these big projects being awarded again and proceeding. Look at Diriyah this summer, for example. But I don't think it's really got to do much with PIF's external or internal processes. So I think it's more to do with project delivery than anything else. So it's been mentioned recently that the Muqab work had started. Any details on it and design choice for structure? The Muqab is the cubes structure, 400 by 400 by 400 meters. Is part of the central element of New Murabba, which will also feature another World Cup stadium. Now, New Murabba has yet to really start. We've got China Harbour doing the groundworks, infrastructure works, and piling works on the project, which itself is $1 billion contract. And we've got tenders now out for the raft works. But as far as I understand, there's no work started on the actual Muqab structure itself, but work will start next year. And indeed, you can visit the project site as well to the northwest of Riyadh. It's huge. It's 19 square kilometers, which is about 6 times larger than downtown Dubai, where Burj Khalifa is. So enormous project as well. Now, a lot of New Murabba will be developed through PPPs. There's a huge amount of road works going to be required, diversion works, and certainly a very exciting project, which is certainly going to gear up and ramp up with the Muqab structure over the next 18 months or so. Right, spending is different from contract values. How do the two compare from data point of view? So spending, in other words, cash flow, that's the money going through the project over time, of course, is going to lag from contract awards. So while 2023 was a record year for contract awards, it's only starting from now that we're going to start seeing that cash flow start trickling through to project subcontracts, material deliveries and orders, and so on. So normally you would apply a 12 to 18-month delay or lag on spending from contract award to seeing that actually flow through to the various contracts on the projects. And that means that now we're entering that peak period where that 2023 number will start being felt by the market on the ground on projects themselves. So we're still in 2023 still really seeing those lowish numbers from 2022 and 2021. So for many companies, they won't yet have seen this big uptick in spending. It's only from now onward that we will see that. Question here about King Salman International Airport. Will it be an entirely independent project, separate from King Khalid International Airport, or will it serve as an expansion of King Khalid, increasing the current terminals and runways? So King Salman International Airport is, of course, touted or advertised as the world's largest airport, should be ready in its first phase by 2030, and it's going to exceed more than 120 million passenger capacity a year. At the moment, it's going to be built around the existing airport. I don't believe it's an extension of the existing terminals. I could be wrong, but it is essentially going to involve the construction of new runways and terminals, as well as logistic cities and residential areas around the existing international airport, rather than separate from it. That's what we know for now. 3 PMCs have recently been appointed, as you may have seen in the news, and of course Foster and Partners is helping with the architectural works and master plan. So now talking about battery energy storage, which is an important part of the Giga projects, those which are off-grid, like Red Sea Global and NEOM. How much of those do you expect to be put online over the next 2 years? 33 gigawatts of equivalent hours of storage capacity. So battery energy storage are considered essential elements of these Giga projects going forward, because they are using renewable energy sources. And of course, renewable energy, whether it's at nighttime or during imperfect weather conditions, cannot necessarily be relied on to supply the electricity. So you do need battery energy storage systems for those, and they are being delivered, they are being built. There's a lot of agreements also being made with the private sector to deliver and operate some of these systems. So far, it does appear that the battery energy storage program is being built according to plan. Where can we download the presentation? The presentation will be emailed to you as long as you registered for this webinar directly. You will receive an email with the PDF version of this PowerPoint. You will also receive later on a link to the YouTube video once we've uploaded this to YouTube. Some questions which I've already answered, so I won't go into. If you don't mind, I've either answered them now or I've answered them during the course of the webinar. With a significant reduction in oil and gas expenditure by Aramco, is this instead being used to subsidize the Giga projects? Well, I'm not sure that's the case. I think Aramco's spending is entirely separate from the Giga project spending. I don't think any decisions by Aramco on capital expenditure are dictated to by the government or by the Giga projects program. So I don't think there's a linkage. The government dictates how much oil Aramco should produce, and oil and gas it should produce, and its targets for production capacity, but it doesn't dictate what Aramco spends in terms of project activity. So we've seen a resurgence by Aramco in project spending this year. So I don't think there is a link between Giga project spending and a downturn in Aramco project spending. Question here about JEDCO project. JEDCO is Jeddah Airports Company project. Now, JEDCO is a major project, actually, more than $20 billion by most estimates, which involves a new terminal at Jeddah Airport, which is King Abdulaziz International Airport, and that will involve also modernization, expansion of the existing main passenger terminal, as well as the Hajj terminal as well. And this also is planned to be delivered by 2032. So I'm not clear, or we're not clear on specifics about particular work underway already by GEDCO, but over the next couple of years, certainly there will be some major works tendered and awarded there. Can we see a crisis happening in the future, a bubble that is similar to what we saw in Dubai in 2008? I don't think so. I think the market these days is very different. If you take real estate, for example, now most projects have escrow accounts. There is much less speculative buying of property, and mortgage controls are much more stringent than they were in 2008. So I don't think we're hitting a bubble that we saw in 2008. But of course, we're still subject to supply and demand. Now, interestingly, in Saudi Arabia, we're actually in a slightly opposite situation, because at the moment in Saudi Arabia, companies, individuals cannot, non-Saudi nationals cannot buy property in the kingdom. Now, imagine if Saudi Arabia's real estate sector was opened up to international buyers. It would be like Dubai was in 2000, 2001, 2002. Suddenly, the world wakes up to the fact that there is a real estate opportunity in the kingdom. They can buy property in Riyadh. They can buy property as part of these Giga projects, like NEOM, for example, like Diriyah. And so there will be also huge demand for property in places like Mecca and Medina. So that would create a surge in investment activity and a surge in real estate investment in the kingdom. And it would propel the projects market even higher and even faster in the kingdom. So rather the opposite to a bubble, we will see a massive increase in project activity in the kingdom. Of course, that in itself, down the line, 10 years later, may result in a bubble. But in the short term, it would create an unparalleled project opportunity. I'm just going through your questions now because we are running out of time. And as you might have heard, I've got a bit of a sore throat today, so my voice is breaking up. A question here about the projects report. Does the 2025 report include all the Giga projects or only NEOM? The Giga projects report covers 20 different Giga projects. In addition to NEOM, it includes all the others, PIF subsidiary Giga project companies, as well as some other major Giga projects like King Salman Park, Green Riyadh, Sports Boulevard, and Al Ula, to name but a few. I'll just answer a couple of other questions. If I haven't answered your question and you do want to ask it to me, or you want to speak to me about anything, you have here my email address, you have here my number. If you want to WhatsApp me or email me, I'll be more than happy to try and answer your question if I can. Right, where's the land bridge project? I can't find it on here in your presentation. So the land bridge, another interesting project, very long-term project. The land bridge is a new railway line for freight and passengers between Jeddah, Riyadh, and Dammam. It's been in the pipeline for a long, long time, and it's been under discussions with the Chinese government for a long time to finance the project. We don't know really if it seems to be any closer to coming about. We know now that the Saudi Arabia Railways is doubling the Northern Minerals Railway. Last week, Peony Group from Switzerland, the engineering firm actually now called ARCS, won the contract to double the line between the far northwest and Al Khail. So that's a major railway line now being developed. We've also seen tendering start for Line 7 of the Metro in Riyadh, as well as the extension of Line 2 in Riyadh. But the land bridge has gone very quiet, and it has been quiet now for at least a decade. But we are hopeful that at some point over the next 2-3 years, it will happen. And that is a $10 billion, $15 billion plus project. So we do hope that that will come to the market soon. But no, it's not part of this specifically of this presentation today. Right, we have another Giga project that you haven't mentioned called Masar in Mecca. Now, Masar, which basically means boulevard or walkway in English, is perhaps the new word or the new terminology for the Qura project, the King Abdullah Qura project in Mecca, which has been under construction for a number of years now. It's a massive project. NESMA is the main contractor for this. And yes, I mean, it's certainly something that has been ongoing, huge project, but it's not something that we've specifically covered under the Giga Projects program, just because it's something that's predated the Giga Projects program and because it's something that's been going on for some time. But you're right, it is a major project, and it is certainly something that is also consuming a lot of resources in Saudi Arabia right now. Another project which we haven't specifically included in this Giga Projects program is the Ruwa Al Haram project also in Mecca, which is another project very similar to the Ruwa Al Medina project in Medina. The Ruwa Al Haram project is again focused on providing accommodation for the millions of pilgrims, which of course journey to the Umrah and Hajj in Mecca every year. Right, one final question. How will the PIF finance all these projects? We're going to have to ask the PIF. The PIF has a number of options. It can sell some of its assets. It can use some of its profits from its investments. It can raise finance through bond issuances. Of course, it's something it's already done. It can guarantee finance raised by its different subsidiaries. And it can be, of course, granted funds or shares in companies like Aramco or finances directly by the government. This will be a combination of how it will finance the projects. And eventually, we're also starting to see these PIF projects start to earn revenues on their own. For example, Red Sea Global is starting to earn revenues from the first 3 hotels it's opened. NEOM is going to start earning revenues from Sadala Island hotels. So eventually, over time, these Giga projects will start becoming revenue earners and will in due course IPO. When they IPO, that will raise more funds for investment in them. We're still at the early stages. They still need to mature and develop a little bit more, but eventually we'll start seeing them also earn some of their own revenues and be able to finance themselves on their own 2 feet. At that point, government guarantees, whether implicit or explicit, will no longer be necessary. Right, I'm very sorry I haven't been able to answer all of your questions. I can see that we've got still more than 70 questions, but I apologize I haven't been able to answer them all. We've run out of time. Please reach out to me directly if you do have any burning questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, thank you very much for sticking along to the end and for your attention. Please take a chance to read the presentation again as it comes into your inbox, and also to watch this presentation again online if you need to. But for me, from all my colleagues at MEED, thank you very much, and hopefully speak to you all again very soon in our next webinar next month, when we'll be looking at the green hydrogen market. Goodbye, and thank you very much.